Hi, good morning, everyone. It's Monday again, Monday Live here with Bailey and French. And I'm joined by Richard and Heather, and I'll get you guys to introduce yourselves in a minute. But thank you for joining this morning. It's great to have you with us.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah. And in the sunshine as well. Again, in Brighton, it always seems to be sunny on a Monday Live, which is brilliant because it sets us up. And this is why we do it, right? So we want to help leaders to impact their organization positively on a Monday morning. What practical things can you take away? What are people talking about, and what are we hearing from clients? What's some of the top things that you need to focus on this week? Bring into your meetings, bring into your one-to-one, bring into your growth strategy meetings, whatever it is, we can hopefully help. And this week, I guess we wanted to put a spin on the normal topic, which would be around growth and productivity and performance. And kind of focus around mental health because it is Mental Health Awareness Week. And the topic that came up a lot when we put this out as a what should we do, what's most helpful for people, was loneliness, and in specific kind of context around hybrid teams. You are both working across public and private sectors, so I'm really interested to get into your experiences, what people are hit, what your own experiences are, but also what's happening in the world of the clients. So let's get into it. But Richard, great to have you. Heather, great to have you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to be here very early on a Monday morning.
Can't hear it in the voice at all that it's first thing on Monday morning.
Yeah, it's been a long week. It's been a long weekend as well because I've had the kind of bank holiday weekends, and this is the first Monday back after a while. And hopefully my sound doesn't go this time. I think I had that 2 weeks ago. So just tell me.
Loud and clear at the moment.
What are your experiences of loneliness at work?
So I can probably jump straight in. So I have been a fully remote employee since 2018. So for a good few years now. And it's not always been plain sailing, to be honest. When you are fully remote, and particularly pre-pandemic, before remote working was kind of the norm for most people, it can be very isolating. And especially at a time the organisation I was working for weren't really set up for remote workers, and I was the only one, so we didn't have the tech in place for staying connected. So there were times during that experience where I was physically disconnected from my colleagues and also kind of technologically disconnected from my colleagues, and it was really hard to deal with at times. And I think for a lot of people experiencing that during the kind of early stages of the pandemic through the first lockdowns, it was the first time for many of us that we were, not able to kind of link up with colleagues in the normal way, combined with everything that was happening in the world. It was a lot to deal with. So I think this year's Mental Health Awareness Week hashtag is I've been there. And I can say for sure, I've been there. So, yeah.
Thank you.
The hybrid working does throw up a lot of challenges, doesn't it, personally? And just because you've got people at home with you doesn't necessarily mean that you're not lonely. I've known people who are freelancing, working from home every day. They don't have conversations, and they might live with someone, or they might be able to go out at lunch and have a chat in a shop. But it's very different from being in the office. And I didn't realize until I started at Bailey and French, which was as lockdowns were starting to finish, how much I enjoyed personally being around people. I'd quite enjoyed remote working at my previous roles, but now being around and interacting with people, it's really important. And it's those little things as well. When a meeting finishes that's hybrid, and then everyone carries on chatting once the video has been turned off with the remote people. I think we're really conscious of that at Bailey and French, that we don't have these conversations when the remote people aren't connected to us, or we still chat on Teams even when there's people in the office, because there is a chunk of the office that is up and down the country. So I think there is an element of trying to take responsibility as well to help your colleagues out.
Yeah, for sure. That's really appreciated as well, Richard, and is noticed. So I think we've definitely I feel like most organisations now are adapting to hybrid and looking at ways that loneliness isn't allowed to kind of grow and fester. So yeah.
There has to be an element of understanding as well of what loneliness is, because I think I experienced it the most when I was at university. At a couple of points where I had huge friendship groups, I had tons of housemates. I could go and walk to someone else's house and just drop in, and I would be able to have a conversation with them. But at the same point, you're all away from home. You don't necessarily know these people deep down. You've just met them because you're having a similar experience to them, which is great. But you can feel very isolated, very lonely. And I do have heard from feedback, people during lockdown, that's how it was for them. That they might have been in a house share or whatever, but being withdrawn from people that they wanted to go and see, or the variety of people they used to see, it makes a big difference.
Do you think so obviously a lot of the work that we do is around positive psychology and around kind of how to become more resilient and become more productive and to be more self-aware and all of these topics that maybe you wouldn't have had the exposure to before. Has that helped? Has that impacted how, so for example, your experiences at university and then throughout life, is that different now?
I think for me it probably is. Yeah, I mean, one of the main things that I've kind of had an understanding of since working at Bailey and French is the PERMA model, right? And how building resources in those different areas can really help me as a human being, to be well and to thrive. And for sure, that kind of relationships piece is really important. And it's not just the kind of surface level weird colleague relationships, but it's also those little connections, things like Richard saying, noting when people are taking time to, check in with me, or, oh, actually, we're having a conversation that relates to Heather and she's remote. So let's pause this conversation and make sure she's part of it. So, those little things do really have an impact and help a lot. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen in the private sector, and I'm sure you've got a lot to talk about returning to work and not, because it's coming up in public a lot, Heather, but businesses are trying to get their people back into the office as much as possible, because collaboration is useful and it works, and they want to have those water cooler moments. I hate that expression, but at least you know what I'm talking about. But they're doing it with, we'll have a fruit bowl, or we'll have this. I don't think they really understand people's drivers of why they don't want to come back to the office, or why they do want to come back to the office. And by doing these little bits, by keeping people inclusive, I mean, we've heard that people are nervous to go out and socialize again, and that's something they did before lockdown, and it's something they're struggling now. Is that perpetuated from the loneliness? It becomes a bit of a vicious circle. You're lonely, so you don't want to go out, and then you don't go out, so you're lonely. I don't know, but I don't think people trying to get people back into the workplace are understanding that they're focusing on the perks that are a bit physical, that are a bit gimmicky, rather than, well, what's the psychology behind it? Why are people not wanting to come back to the office? What can we do to make them feel supported to come back to the office? Or if not, how can we make them feel supported working remotely and not feel like they're being pushed out of the organization, or missed out on promotions? Because that's, I think, something that's people could be worried about in an organization that doesn't take hybrid seriously.
Yeah, there's an interesting kind of Tuesday, Wednesdays and Thursdays crowd at the moment, and a lot of talk about what we call those. But I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because why would there's a question there around flexibility and my quality of life, because I can be flexible, and actually extending my weekend Monday, Friday gives me that kind of that flexibility. But also maybe there's an element of, well, my organization trusts me, therefore I'll kind of continue to work, and that's quite it's quite empowering from a trust point of view. But I guess there's something there that you're talking about. How do we get people back into the office or wanting to connect with each other? I think that's more the point. Remote or not, how do we want people to be connecting with each other? And what frameworks and tools and methods are we using to encourage that? Heather, you just mentioned something that was quite important about the little things that the team do to make you feel included. quite important.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's comparing the kind of remote hybrid experience to 2018 to today. It's worlds apart, and even between organisations, it's worlds apart. And it's very noticeable to me that the organisation I work in now does have that framework in place. So that's been brilliant. And, you know, it's been a learning process. I feel like we've all learned from each other through the process of figuring out, you know, how do we overcome loneliness together? And maybe we haven't necessarily put that word on it of loneliness. Maybe we're looking at it as how are we inclusive? But for sure, we've worked through a few different blips together, and I think we've gotten ourselves into a really good place as a team. You know, we're working really effectively together, and I know that it doesn't matter to me that I'm not, as Richard says, visible in the office, because my work is visible. Our conversations are still visible, inclusive conversations. So for me, that's not been a worry, which is great.
Can I ask, introverted and extroverted people, we talk about them quite a lot in the office, about how people get their energy, etc. Is it just there's a straight line down the middle? Extroverted people get lonely working from home, hybrid, and want to be in the office. Introverted people are the opposite. They might even feel lonely in the office because they might feel completely isolated. I mean, lonely doesn't necessarily mean, as I said before, that there's no one around you. It's more of how you feel connected with those people. Is it more complicated than that? Or?
I think it's probably more complicated than that. I mean, I can answer from a personal perspective of I am an introvert. For sure, I'm an introvert. People don't think that I am because I'm quite chatty and expressive, but I for sure get my energy on my own. And even though at home working remotely, I'm in my element, as it were, there are still times that I feel lonely. And just because I'm an introvert and, you know, get my energy on my own, it doesn't mean that sometimes, you know, if I'm having a bad day, I might pick up the phone and give Ant a call and say, you know, can we have a coffee and a chat? Or, you know, bring somebody else in the team and exchange memes or whatever it might be, you know. I don't know if that answered the question. Maybe it was a sideways point, but
no, I mean it did. It was just more. I guess. Would you expect someone who is an extrovert to be more lonely if they are working remotely and want to come into an office, if there is an office available? Because for some businesses now there isn't. I was wondering if it was you're in this group, so you'll feel that. You're in this group, so you'll feel that.
I think it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because it's also about what you're talking about is energy. Where do people get their energy?
Yeah.
And, you know, introvert, extrovert is one way of looking at that. Another way is, you know, do I get my energy from relationship building? In which case, could that be remote? So Heather, me and you will share a GIF every now and again, and it just, hey, I'm here. You know, it's a way of building relationships, but it's using the technology that's in place. Or do you prefer kind of more of a collaboration feel? Okay, let's connect on this project. Hey, I've got this idea. Can we bounce some ideas off each other? There's different subtleties in what I find in myself, different subtleties in my own strengths that I need to be aware of to be able to work more effectively with all of the people amongst the team, but especially keeping my own energy and spirits high.
For sure.
I mean, that's a really good point, because with using Teams, I'm connected to the entire office. So not just the bank of people I'm sitting in or the bank next door that I could just about yell to. If we put something funny on Teams or there's an interesting point, you can hear the reactions all the way down, people who would never be able to have a discussion with you, and the same with the remote. So, I mean, there is a way of being even more connected with people through using a platform like Teams or Slack or whatever your organization uses.
I really like what you're saying there, Ant, as well about you know, using our strengths. I mean, one of my strengths is collaboration, which is, I mean, it says it in the name. You've got to be connected to people and you know, working together to use that strength. And we've mentioned technology. I mean, that has made that possible from anywhere. You know, collaborating from anywhere is possible now. So that's a big plus in the technology box for 2022. So,
Yeah, I often wonder, is it people's mindsets when they have these conversations? You know, a lot of our clients are talking about kind of entitlement culture or the differences in generations and needs across generations, but I think just needs across people, actually, if you break that down a little bit more. And it's really interesting. We've talked a lot about the whole self-awareness, other awareness, human leadership, team flow. You know, there's almost those three levels of how do we improve my own energy and be aware of what gives myself energy, and how do I lean on the technologies to improve my own performance? How am I more aware of the impact that this is having on the team? You know, making sure that Richard, okay, I haven't spoken to Richard in a while. I know he's got a relationship building strength. I wonder where he's getting his energy from. Let's send him something or pick up the phone.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're seeing, so Richard, you primarily work in private, Heather primarily public sector. Are there differences in sectors as much as there is generations? And what are you seeing?
I think the awareness that you mentioned is really important, that our generation, and particularly the generation coming up who will be entering the workforce shortly, they have a self-awareness of mental health that just didn't exist, I don't think, when I was younger, of not only that, what it is, but that it's okay. And I've been reading that, and Samaritans mentioned that loneliness has increased by a fifth over the last 2 years. And it obviously has done, because people have been feeling lonely. But I wonder if there is an element to self-awareness. People have realized what loneliness is, in the same way people have started to understand mental health more, and understand that they can be perfectly healthy and still suffer a little bit from mental health. It's not a negative thing. It's lots of different aspects through anxiety, or understanding how they feel and being able to vocalize that and seek help for it, rather than bottling it up and it becoming definitely becoming an issue down the line. But yeah, that comes up a lot when I'm talking to leaders at the moment. They are talking about younger generations, that entitlement makes it sound really negative, doesn't it? But it is. They're asking for so much more that they should get, that they are entitled to. They should have their mental health looked after, their loneliness. You spend a lot of time at work. There is a government, you should be looking after your people and seeking that out. But obviously, it's been coming up a lot in the public sector as well, Heather.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the world of work has changed forever now, and the expectation for what people, work used to be a place that you go, and it's now a thing that you do, right? It's not about where you are, which building you're in, turning up and ticking the boxes. It's about outputs as much as it's about inputs. And something that I've noticed across really all of the public sector is it doesn't seem to be a generational thing. The kind of, I don't know whether to say attitude adjustment. That sounds a bit attitude shift. Maybe people have changed their thinking around it, and it doesn't seem to be necessarily a generational thing. But one thing I have noticed and picked up on through conversations is that it has improved inclusivity for a lot of different kinds of people, making work more flexible. There are people who are carers or primary caregivers. There are people who maybe have disabilities or mental health issues, as you mentioned, Richard. And this kind of hybrid flexible model has made things a lot better for a lot of people. So I think as well in the public sector, most of the departments, particularly in the civil service, are taking a really kind of gradual return to office approach. I know there was quite a lot in the news a couple of weeks ago around you must be back in for X number of days. But I think people are kind of reviewing that and saying, let's speak to people as individuals. We're going to put out a blanket statement, but that doesn't mean we're not open to having conversations about what suits you as an individual human being. So that's been quite nice.
Yeah, we talk a lot about work coming into our personal lives as through the pandemic, but there is an element that our personal lives are coming into work as well, that employers are trying to understand that okay, you have childcare issues, well, we'll do this for you, or you're a carer, or you have this particular trait, which means that you're going to be better remote, or you're going to be better in person. And obviously, how someone feels and their loneliness is going to become an important factor in that.
We've it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of conversation about what is working for people, and being curious about different people's experiences, a lot around gender and race and all sorts of different experiences that people are having that you wouldn't necessarily know are going on unless you just reached out and had the conversation. But equally, as an organization, you physically can't necessarily meet all of those needs,
Right.
of complex human beings. How are you finding your clients are kind of juggling that?
Well, that's the problem, they're juggling and not necessarily keeping everything in the air. But sorry, Heather, you were going to say.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, I think what I've noticed is that clients are taking things on a kind of case by case basis, and I don't like using that phrase because it implies that the person is the case, but they are basically looking at people's individual circumstances and saying what works for Richard, what are Richard's specific circumstances that mean that more days hybrid are going to work better for him, or flexible hours, compressed hours, whatever it might be. And that really, just from general feedback, seems to be quite a good way of doing things, because as you say, not everyone's the same and you can't know everyone's situation. But I do think, and it's just my opinion on this, you have to sometimes take a bit of personal responsibility for flagging that you do need something different. And so for me, that was, I need a fully remote role. These are the reasons why. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it's the empowerment, a big part of our leadership development that we do. It's about empowering others, isn't it? So you have to say, you have to take responsibility for this, but this is how I'm going to support you to do that.
Yeah.
This is the tools that we can offer you. What do you want? Come and speak to me, because otherwise people won't. They'll keep quiet. They're suffer in silence, and that's the last thing you want.
For sure. And it was also for me about, we spoke a bit about entitlement. It was not just this is what works for me, it's this is how it works for the business, and this is how it will improve X, Y, and Z from your point of view. Because whilst I'd love for it to be all about me, unfortunately it isn't always. So yeah.
If whether you're an individual contributor or a manager or a leader of any sort, if the best of you is going to come from being in an office or being remote, the business has to take that into consideration, because they want you to be productive. It's going to be ultimately good for the organization, and if that means that you're working from home, that's important.
It's interesting. We obviously, I said right back at the beginning, Monday Live is about helping leaders to really understand their impact, more positive impact that they can have on productivity and growth, and creating a better workplace for the future. And I said that we were talking about Mental Health Awareness Week. And I feel like there should be some separation in those, right? You don't just build a mental health environment for employees to thrive just because it's good for performance and productivity. But what you've just said there is quite interesting, because it's about how you communicate, perhaps, how when you do need something, to prevent the whole entitlement culture becoming a blocker to you getting something that might really impact your mental health in the organization. It's understanding what the key business drivers are and what the key messages are and how to communicate that. Whether you like that or not, that's the reality of the workplace that we're in. Is there any experiences that you both have had, either at Bailey & French or elsewhere, about how to do this in a really effective way?
So for me, pre-pandemic, as I say, I went remote in 2018. The role that I was doing at the time, I was based down in Sussex, and I was probably doing about 50,000 miles of driving per year. So that was enjoyable. And basically, I wanted to relocate. As you guys will know, I'm now further north, way past the M25. So basically, the way I approached it was I firstly had a conversation with my direct line manager and said, listen, I'm thinking about moving. I really love my role here. I've had a bit of a think about how I would be able to do the exact same thing working remotely and actually save the business a significant amount of money in terms of travel expenses, all of that kind of time as well. Are you open to a conversation about that? And I was very fortunate at the time that my line manager said, yeah, I'm really open to having a chat about it. You give me the numbers, you tell me what you think it would look like, and let's talk. So I put together a bit of a business case, had a chat. Everything that I asked for, I didn't get, but you don't ask, you don't get. There had to be compromise on certain things. And it was very much, well, let's trial it. Let's give it a 3-month trial, see how it goes, stay in regular contact, be open and honest with each other about if things are not working. So I can give an example on that actually around when you're remote, it's quite important that there's good visibility of your work, because somebody can't look over to your desk and see that you're sat there working. It's really important that whatever your metric is, you are transparent about what you're doing to work towards it. So there were lots of those conversations around how do we report things accurately, where it's not micromanaging, and various bits and bobs. Long story short, it ended up getting signed off, and kind of helped to build out that company's what will remote look like in the future? Are we open to hiring more remote staff now we've demonstrated that it can work? So my kind of advice for anyone asking for whatever they might need, whether it be remote or compressed hours or whatever it might be, have that casual chat with your line manager first and just sound them out, see what their thinking is, but make sure you've also thought about how it will impact you and how it can positively impact the business. And it's much more likely to be a positive conversation, I think. Sorry, that was a lot of words.
No, I think your organisation was very fortunate to have that, because then with the pandemic, they had their test case ready to go.
Right.
I guess on loneliness impacting positivity, productivity and growth, it's what we talk about all the time. If people aren't thriving, the organisation is going to struggle to thrive. It's not going to have the resilience that it needs to get through the harder times. If you have a workforce that are lonely, whether they're in the office, at home, or if they're just struggling with the after effects of the pandemic, getting back into social experiences, getting around to getting out to people, being productive and proactive about their loneliness, the organization is going to struggle. People aren't going to be getting in the flow. They're not going to be productive. And so profits maybe will be lower, or turnover will be higher, because people are going to start looking for something else, looking for a fresh start. So by addressing it and helping your people, I think you're really going to help increase the resilience within the organization and not just your people.
Yeah, I really like your all of that actually, but also the your specific example, Heather, because it shows a couple of things that I think are really important for us with the 2 minutes that we've got left to kind of take away for this week. We talked a couple of weeks weeks ago about PDP conversations and manager one-to-ones that were all coming up. Here in the UK, it was a big thing for April to have kind of one-to-ones, and we were going through that process ourselves. And one of the things that I really like about the example that you said was the openness and willingness for you to go to someone, your line manager, to have that conversation, but go prepared and go with, hey, here's the reasons, I've thought about the risks, here's the risk mitigation plan. You really put some effort and thought into it. And you've gone in with the mindset of openness and actually knowing probably that you're going to have to compromise and you won't get everything, but you might get something. I think that's quite different to the entitlement culture that we were talking about a minute ago. That's a very planned kind of contracting almost. Hey, look, I'm coming to you with a thing that's going to massively improve my performance, but I know that there's not going to be everything, but can we just have a chat and be open to this? Certainly from a line manager point of view, if I was to hear that, I would be much more open to, hey, I just want to go and work remotely. I think that's quite powerful. What would you say in return? So both of you kind of are in teams line managing, etc. What would you do if someone was coming to you with that challenge, or if maybe a peer came to you and said, hey, I'm looking to do this, but I don't know how to go about it? As a line manager, but also as a peer, what would you be doing?
I think I'd be saying do your homework. Make sure you've got all the information that covers off all aspects of what it is you want to ask for. Have you thought about everything? And then I would also say, let's talk. You know, if it's somebody reporting into me, let's talk. Let's have a chat about it. You know, let's explore it together. Let's and you know, if it all looks good, let's take it the next step. You know, let's give HR a shout. Let's look at our policies. You know.
I think that's really good, because you can have these great conversations, but you still have to remember you're in a commercial environment ultimately, whether that be private or the public sector. That it has to be good for the organization you're working with, and so by giving evidence, saying this is what I'm doing, this is how I can do it remotely, or this is what I need to help with my my day to day. It makes a big impact, and it makes it a lot easier for your line manager as well, because they're probably going to need sign off, or discussing it with a peer. They might then be a champion for it as well.
Yeah, and we're hearing an awful lot about kind of the organizational structure and process might not be ready. So although a lot of people have gone remote or working hybrid, maybe the tech isn't in place, or maybe the structure isn't there, and actually getting a no shouldn't have an impact on kind of people leaving and leaving in droves just because you've said the word no. It's how you deliver that message, and do they feel heard, and are they respected in that conversation, and all of those things are vitally important. So yeah, I agree. That's been a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your experiences. I really appreciate it. It's an ongoing one. I think it's not something that we've solved. I don't think it's something that will ever be solved, but it's the ongoing progress for this week, and hopefully people have picked up some practicalities that they can bring into their conversations this week. Maybe there's someone in your team, maybe there's a peer, you know, that's wanting this, or looking to go remote, or wanting to just improve their environment so that they don't feel so lonely or disconnected from the workplace. Hopefully this has helped. Thank you. Same again next week, I suppose. Monday Live. We'll be back again next week. And I think there's a lot of activity going on this week, isn't there? Or next week with Learning Week.
Yeah, we've got Learning at Work Week coming up. I think it kicks off on the 18th of May, I think the date is. We'll be running a series of, I think, 4 or 5 webinars in total, covering loads of our kind of key areas of focus. So definitely keep an eye on the LinkedIn page for more info on that.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Look forward to that. I've seen some of the topics, and they're quite yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about in that time. Thank you for joining. We're way over, but appreciate it. And thank you everyone who's joined, put messages in the chat, and has joined on YouTube and LinkedIn. Appreciate it. And yeah, see you all next week.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Again, bye-bye.
Thanks.